I was president from 1984 to 1986. And one of the biggest things that happened, changes that came about during my term, was the state supervisor of visual, fine, and performing arts. And that was Gina May. And many things happened during my term, and the arts organizations were brought together: drama, theater, dance, art. And we held our very first Arts Leadership Conference. So that was really an important part of my 2 years as WMEA president. In fact, during the convention that year, we had an arts day, arts education day, and all of the arts organizations came to our music convention and did sessions. And so it was a wonderful sharing experience. So of all the things that happened during my 2 years, I would say that was probably the biggest. Also, we had many task force. We had a governmental relations task force, and we had All-State and Jazz. And on the All-State, one of the concerns that we had was the small schools in our state were kind of plagued by not having representation in our state convention, all-state groups. And so we came up with a policy whereby in the small schools, those that had sent in an audition tape, if they were in band, choir, or orchestra, that there would be at least one representative from all the small schools in the state. So, which made it a little difficult in selecting, because we had to get all the three chairmen together, the band, choir, and orchestra, and then they had to decide, which from this particular school would be representing them. But that was wonderful to have that happen. And another important thing that happened during my term was we brought curriculum officers on the board, which continues today. And that was a very important part of having teachers in our state have somebody representing them on the state executive board, and to have somebody that they could be in contact with if there were, situations in their particular school district or problems. So that was really important to have them on our board. Also, getting back to the All-State, on the choir, I'm a choral person, so there were always tons of women, girls in our high schools that would send in audition tapes, but we only had a mixed choir of maybe 300, so that would be maybe 150 girls out of 600 that send in tapes. So we had an all-state task force that came up with the idea of having a treble choir also. And so we did start having a treble choir in all-state, and it continues today. So we have a mixed choir and we have a treble choir. And they are selected on the basis of, if you have like 300 sopranos auditioning, number one goes in the treble choir, number two goes in the state, and so it just went back and forth. So you wouldn't take the top and have them in one particular choir. One of the other things, or several other things that we did, was we put a directory together of all of the music educators in the state, and during my term, we sent that out to all of the members, or all of the music educators in the state, hoping that would increase our membership, but it didn't. So, but we felt that was something that to present to music educators in the state on what is going on in WMEA. We also sent our first issue of Voice to all of the music educators in the state. At the time I was president, there were maybe 52% of the music educators in the state were members of WMEA MENC. And I know today that is, much larger. We had marching band contest. We also had a mentor system that we brought into place, which would be a teacher in a particular geographical location of a university would team up with a music ed major in one of the universities. And I happened to do that with a student at PLU, and it was very rewarding for them and also for me to see what is going on was going on at the time in music education. Also, probably one of the big things that we did was WMEA bought a computer with a printer for $2,500. That was a biggie, because when we did our directory, we didn't have a WMEA computer, so it was always done by whoever was doing the directory, their school district, And so we did buy a computer, and I have no idea where it is today, but we don't need to worry about that. So. Also, elementary music was very crucial during our time. Barb Porter was our curriculum officer and had a tremendous task force working with her. And they came up with a elementary study guide for new teachers, for elementary teachers, or even people that have been, teaching for years. So we had a marching band contest at Memorial Stadium in Seattle. We also had WIAA and WMEA music committees, and they were crucial to the contests that were going on within their leagues to work in contact with the state contest chairman and making sure that all the right roads led to the state's contest. I had my convention in Wenatchee, and probably the biggest challenge was, guess what it did? It snowed. So it made it very difficult for members to get there, and performing groups, especially performing groups. And even our national president got as far as Seattle, but could not make a flight to Wenatchee. So Dr. Paul Lehman got back on the plane and went back to Washington, D.C. We did, however, have at our convention Dr. David Humphrey, who was the national director of the National Alliance for the Arts at the John F. Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., and was our keynote speaker at the convention banquet. Where we are today is probably where we were when I was president of WMEA, keeping school music in the school curriculum is crucial. Washington has some of the finest music groups in the state. In the nation. Finest music groups in the nation. And it is a plus for the state of Washington, but it's also a huge benefit for the kids who are reaping the rewards of that instruction from our music teachers. I would really like to see WMEA involve more of our younger people. As I was driving over here, I'm thinking to myself, when I went on the board, I had already taught like 25 years. And so it's really important to involve the younger band, choir, orchestra directors in our state as region involvement, region presidents, who eventually then would serve on the state assembly. And I think that's very important to get them involved on the executive board too. Well, they have chapters. Each college has a WMEA chapter. And there is a representative, there is a state president who is from, I don't know who it is this year, but from a college or university who serves on the board. And so they have direct access to the executive board and the state assembly of WMEA. And I mean, I'm just walking on campus this morning, and I just came from a rehearsal where some of the Central kids were singing, and there was a young man who was directing them, and as I was sitting out there waiting, I asked him, I said, "Do you teach here?" And he said, "No, I'm a student here, but I'm directing the choir." And I said, "Well, what year are you?" He said, "Sophomore." That's amazing. So, encouragement. I try. I've been retired for 8 years now, but when I go into colleges or go into high schools, I try to do as much of that as possible, of the encouragement and the importance of teaching music and continuing their music, even if they don't teach it, but the continuing of it, even if it's a community choir or whatever. It's important for their soul. Probably one of the highlights was when I was able to go back to Washington, D.C. to the National Assembly and got to meet with and sit down and talk about the importance of music with Senator Slade Gorton and Representative John Miller. And I mean, it was just even Scoop Jackson. The term before I was president, I went with Neil Porter. So I know what I see in my area, and I taught junior high for years, junior high choirs. When I first came to Puyallup, I had 7 choirs. And it's just impossible with the people use the excuse that it's the wassail, and people are teaching to the wassail. And so they're adding more science classes and more of this and more of that. And I know some very, very outstanding choral directors in Puyallup who now are down from 5 or 6 choirs down to 3. And are teaching elementary music or whatever. In fact, many of our high school band directors are teaching elementary classroom music because of the fact that they have lost, a period or two at their high school. So